Hi guys, thanks so much for coming out. So today I'm talking about climate change and it's linked to meat consumption. So in recent years we've heard a lot about how climate change has been increasing and how it has a lot of detrimental effects on our environment. It's already caused rise in temperature, rise in insect-borne diseases, rise in sea level, melting of the glaciers and ice, and so much more. And while these are all happening, there are all organizations and advertisements, telling us ways to help stop climate change, like turning off the faucet when you're not using the water, turning off the lights when you're not in the room, carpooling with people to save gas, and so forth. And while these are all viable ways to help save the earth, I'm just going to introduce one more way to help. So I'm just going to take a quick poll. How many of you ate meat yesterday? Yeah, so a lot of people. That's just like what's been shown in global studies. Basically, a lot of people are eating meat, and lately it's been going up. I have one of those graphs like that, and we'll see how that is detrimentally affecting the environment. So when we talk about meat consumption, and it's linked to climate change. So before I formally start out, I want to start off with a quote. It's in the US, for example, the average family of four emits more greenhouse gases because of the meat they eat than from driving two cars. But it is cars, not steaks, that regularly come up in discussions about global warming. This is from BBC, quoting one of my papers, National Academy of Science. I think that this is really important because it talks about not only the massive amounts of greenhouse gas that livestock are producing, but it also acknowledges the fact of how meat consumption is kind of unknown in the realm of how it contributes to climate change. So these are my papers. I have some from the Lancet, National Academy of Sciences, PNAS, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and World Watch. So this is where all of my graphs and information is coming from, as well as some statistics. So starting out, I just have two graphs. The first one is talking about calorie consumption per person per day of animal products. This is including milk, cheese, eggs, any dairy products, and meat, excluding butter. And as we look at 2017, it's kind of drawing a line of mid-2000s. If we look at 2017, we're almost about 900 calories per day of just animal product consumption, and that's almost half of a woman's daily amount of calories. For like a sedentary woman, it's about 2,000 calories. That's almost half. I mean, it's a little bit more for men, about 2,500, 3,000, depending on how much they, work out or something. But and then just the second one, we're looking at just meat consumption, grams per day per person. In both graphs, it shows, how in the less developed countries they are eating less meat. That's just because they are, less available to eat meat, and they can't really afford it as much. They don't really have the money to pay for it, while in developed countries like America and Europe, we're eating a lot more. We have a lot more availability to it. I'd just like to point out, it says the American quarter pounder is about 115 grams of meat. If you look at developed countries, that's including America, we're almost double that per day per person. So the total, that's just an average of all of them, but when we're taking into Africa and other places that have less amounts of meat, that's kind of lowering the average. So just some quick terms that I'm going to be using. Factory farming, that's the industry that's taking the animal and putting the meat onto your plate. They're not really focusing on the well-being or the health of the animal. They're really just focusing on the profit and the efficiency of getting the meat onto the plate. Greenhouse gases, that's the gas that absorbs the radiation and the sun's heat and then traps it within our environment and then eventually contributes to global warming. And one of these gases is carbon dioxide, which we'll be talking about later. Climate change, this is the change in global patterns attributed mainly to raised levels of carbon dioxide. It's produced by greenhouse gases and fossil fuels. So, usually when we think about meat, we either think about it, on a plate or just the animal. But can some people name some of the resources that are going into factory farming?
Are you talking about what it requires to
Yeah.
you have to feed them and you have to feed them medication?
Yeah, so food. A whole lot of water, yes. And then there's one more, but
It's hormones, like they.
That's good, yeah. No, it's not hormones, but yeah, that really goes into it. The last one's land. So so the reasons, of course, is they're going to factory farm, you guys got it. So water. It takes about 2,400 gallons of water just to produce 1 pound of meat, while it only takes about 30 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of potatoes or 25 gallons to produce 1 pound of meat. With the ongoing drought in the Midwest and the West, this is really not helping. We could be using this water to help grow our crops or just for people in general, while instead we're having it for these animals. Second, we have land. For these factory farms, they need massive amounts of land to just have the animals to raise them, and this leads to deforestation because the land has to be very barren. Can't have any grass, can't have any trees, which is also contributing to the less oxygen from the trees. Lastly, food. I have a statistic from one of my papers. 97% of the world's soy consumption is fed to livestock. So this is, food. I think what you have to think about is we are giving so much food to these animals to then, make them into food, and then we have less food just from these animals. When at the start we started with so much more. Another statistic, it would take about 40 million tons of food to eliminate world hunger, and almost 20 times that amount of grain are being fed to livestock. So like I said before, we started out with a lot more food, and we ended up with less. How do livestock contribute to climate change themselves? They're using a lot of resources, but the animals themselves are contributing to climate change. So the main sources are their breathing. Just by having these animals on the farms, just by them being on Earth, they're producing more than 32 million tons of CO2, which in turn is warming the Earth, and that accounts for about 51% of annual worldwide greenhouse gas emissions. So if we were just to take out all of those animals, that would cut in half greenhouse gas emissions. The second one is deforestation. Like I said before, they need a lot of land, so we have to clear the land for that, and that leads to a global shortage of grassland and trees. Lastly is methane. Methane warms the atmosphere stronger than carbon dioxide does, and the animals are producing more than 103 million tons of methane emissions. So that's coming from their manure, from their intestines, and stuff like that. So I just have a little video. So this is showing what you would think to see how what a farm would look like, but I found this on Facebook. It's from one of the organizations. This is what an actual factory farm looks like. It's only one subset of farms, so per brand, brands probably have about 1,000, 2,000 of just these, and this is just one subset of them. That's not even contributing to the other brands that are competing with these brands, and that's so much land, so barren, they don't have anything on it, and the amount of animals, when we're looking at it, that's just so much. So next I have two tables. The first one is just talking about the gases coming from the animals. So when we're just looking at cattle, just carbon dioxide, we have over 1 billion tons of gas just from carbon dioxide, just from cattle. That's not even looking at the other animals or even their methane yet. When we look at the total of just carbon dioxide from all the animals, we're over 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide. Once again, not taking into methane. And then the second one that's talking about how the carbon emissions are coming from different places. So, they're coming from their manure, from their intestines, the deforestation, and then fertilizers. So, next I'd like to talk about how we could be changing our plate to help lower our carbon emissions. So, I think what we have to take into account is, all this meat is being produced because there is a demand for it. If there were not a demand for it, then the industry would not produce as much, therefore there would be less animals producing all of these gases and, the land and water and everything like that. So, I just have a few foods highlighted, but be sure to look at all of them. I have highlighted potatoes, soybeans, rice, cheese, and beef. When we're looking at the plant-based foods, we only have small amounts of carbon dioxide, still obviously amounts, but small amounts of kilograms of carbon dioxide, and they're really not amounting to much. I mean, sure, this one's a little bit higher than one, but not really making it to one. The soybeans and the potatoes. But when we're looking at cheese, when we're looking at beef, they're already having high amounts of carbon dioxide, which is coming out to be 30 kilograms, 11 kilograms, also because of their methane emissions. And so, what you're picking to put on your plate is really corresponding to the carbon footprint that you're putting out. So I have 3 sample meals. These are all from Sweden, so generally the same diet. So the first meal A, they have basically a plant-based kind of meal. They have carrots, whole wheat, soybeans, apples, and it's not really, coming out to much CO2 emissions, about 0.42. But when we get down to meal C, we have some beef in there. It's already amounting to more carbon dioxide emissions just because of the beef. So, what you're choosing to put on your plate is, once again, directly attributing to the carbon emissions. So I just have a graph here. It's talking about the protein per greenhouse gas emissions. So when we're just comparing whole wheat versus beef, you're getting a lot more protein per greenhouse gas emissions, when with beef, you're getting like a lot of greenhouse gas emissions with not really that much protein. So I just have a quote. It's the results from one of my papers indicate, largely thanks to the elimination of red meat, food-related emissions would drop about 60%. That's really crazy. Just by stop eating red meat, or with the animal industry, just if that were to be gone, that it would drop about 60%. I just like to take a second to say, I don't know how, if people know how hard it is to get up in front of people and talk about eating, because eating is such an intimate subject. We are faced with a plate three times a day, and what you choose to put on that plate is a very personal choice. So, me being up here is not saying you can eat this, but you can't eat that, and you shouldn't eat that. It's really me just, trying to bring to light yet another way to, help reduce carbon emissions, help reduce emissions totally. And, if there's another way to do that, then we're already closer to, slowing down and stopping climate change, which I think is really important. So, just on the last note, usually when people ask me, they're like, you don't eat meat, you don't eat all of these things, how do you get your protein? So I made a little chart. So this is just a few things. There's some, mock meat, I'd like to say. There's energy bars, protein, and just some peanut butter. And as you can see, just from one serving, I've highlighted them. They're already, major amounts of protein. So the average woman needs about 46 grams of protein per day, while the average man needs about 56 grams of protein per day. And, if you're having, 1 to 2 servings of these per day, not even taking into account the basics like oats, beans, fortified milks, stuff like that, you're getting your protein. So I think that it's important that what you're putting on your plate is both helping the environment while also, getting your nutritional needs. And so, yeah, thanks so much for coming. If anyone has any questions, just read it.
Yeah. Is there any relationship between calories per pound of the substance and then the environmental impact of it, or is it really not correlated and just having to do with the?
That kind of differs because you could have meat and you could have a lot of calories per pound versus a pound of potatoes and you have less amount of calories. I don't know. I think it's more based on the amount that you have. It's not really based on the calories. It's just if you have a pound of meat, this is how much is being emitted. If you have a pound of potatoes, this is how much is being emitted. I don't really think it matters about the calories. I think that's just kind of the internal content, if that makes sense. Yeah.
For your fake meat stuff, do you know where the protein is derived from?
They're basically made from soy and wheat. I don't know all of the ingredients just to go into it, but soy products are very high in protein, so just by making it up like that, they're getting a lot of protein from that. Yeah.